All right. Hello, everybody. Of course, my dog picks great timing, and so I'm a little late because of my dog. No, you may not come outside. So, I am going to be reading chapter 7 today. We left off yesterday with Leon being, hi, Noah. Wait, Noah, yeah. And I don't know who a person is, but hi. I'm having a hard time seeing a little bit about what you guys are typing just because I'm out in the sun. Hi, Marin. So anyway, so hi guys, good to see you. We left off yesterday where Leon was headed to Plazo, which is concentration or camp, as far as he knows, and he snuck in there to see to be with his mom. Hi, Evan. Nice to see you. Hi, Lucas. Yay. Hi. And anyone else who's watching. I don't know if the Epler family is watching, but if you are, hi, Epler family. So chapter 7, my first impression of Plazo as hell on earth never changed. I only needed one look to see that this was an entirely foreign place. No matter how difficult life had been in the ghetto, at least outwardly, it had appeared a familiar world. Yes, we were packed like sardines into too few rooms, but those rooms were in normal apartment buildings. There were streets and sidewalks and the sounds of a city beyond the walls. Hi, Emma. Plazo was an alien world. It was built on 2 Jewish cemeteries that the Nazis had desecrated and destroyed. It was barren, dismal, chaotic. Rocks, dirt, barbed wire, ferocious dogs, menacing guards, and an acre after acre of drab barracks stretched as far as I could see. Hundreds of prisoners in threadbare clothing hurried from one work detail to another, threatened by gun-wielding German and Ukrainian soldiers. The moment I entered the gates of Plazo, I was convinced I would never leave alive. All right, who else is here? Hi, Mom. And did I already say hi, Emma? If I didn't, hi, Emma again. So here we are in a place that, in the ghetto it was bad, but at least it was kind of in a city, and he's describing what it looks like when he gets to the camp. Immediately, the guards divided our group by gender. I shuffled into my assigned barracks on the men's side of the camp. My hope of finding my family plummeted when I learned that I was to stay there indefinitely. I had no idea where my father and David might be. With only my precious thermos bottle, my legacy from Mr. Luftig, and my blanket, I crawled onto a narrow wooden shelf and lay down. Famished, but with no prospect of food, in a cramped room filled with strangers, mercifully, I quickly sank into the oblivion of sleep. All too soon, lights flashed on. Although it was still pitch black outside, guards beat with their sticks on the bunks and shouted at us, stay off, which means get up. It was time to assemble for work assignments. Half asleep, I got down from the shelf and joined my group along with a row upon row of prisoners from other barracks. We stood in the dark and cold for hours. We were counted again, randomly abused, verbally, physically, or both, threatened, counted again, and finally assigned to work. Hi, Maddie. So this part, the next part will probably be a little bit difficult to hear because this is what it was like in the concentration camp. And this is what a kid experienced, what someone your age experienced being in a concentration camp. The work was both menial and dangerous. Most days I hauled lumber, rocks, and dirt to build more barracks. At the end of the day, we received a pitiful portion of watery soup. Then I returned to my shelf in the barracks for a few hours of restless sleep before beginning the ordeal again the next morning. The room where we slept was so crowded that if I left to use the latrine or the bathroom, I would lose my spot. When I returned, I had to elbow my way back into my space. One night, as I stumbled back into my bunk, I found my blanket was gone. I had stupidly left it there, and another prisoner, perhaps even colder and more desperate than I, had taken it. I was left to wrap my arms around myself, and think of my mother's embrace and will myself to sleep. Then the miraculous happened. Some of the men who had begun to watch out for me told me where the Schindler Jews had been assigned. I resolved to search until I found my father and David. This was not an easy decision. I had to be alert every second. If I were spotted, I could be killed. But my yearning to see my father and brother overpowered reason. Weak as I was, I stole away, determined to find my father and brother. Finally, totally exhausted, when I thought I would have to abandon my search, I opened one more door. There they were. I had never thought of my father and brother as beautiful, but right then I thought they were the most beautiful people I had ever seen. When they recognized me, they were as excited as I was, hardly daring to believe that I had made it out of the ghetto. "We thought you had been deported," David said. As he spoke, I saw pain and helplessness in my father's eyes as he realized how weak and emaciated I had become. We talked in whispers for a few nervous minutes. As I left, my father promised that he would ask Schindler to hire me. Meanwhile, he cautioned, I must stay where I had been assigned and avoid attracting any attention. A week or so later, I had learned enough about the layout of the camp to guess where my mother was. Plazo was frequently chaotic as construction continued and new prisoners arrived daily. One afternoon, I took advantage of the pandemonium to sneak into the women's section to find my mother. I was so small and thin, and my hair so shaggy, I could pass for a girl. I knew I would be severely punished if I were discovered, yet the danger was worth it if I could find my mother. I admit, that day, I was just plain lucky. Without too many wrong turns, I found her barracks. She was lying on her wooden shelf. When she saw me, she couldn't believe her eyes. To my disappointment, she seemed more startled than happy. "How did you get here?" she asked. Before I could answer and tell her that I had found my father and brother, she told me, "You can't stay, you have to go." She could not hold back the tears as she uttered the words that would send me away from her. At the very last moment, she reached into the pile of rags on the shelf where she slept and pulled out a walnut-sized piece of dry bread. It was all in the world my mother had to give me, the best she could do. I'm sure it was the only food she had. She embraced me for a few priceless seconds, pressed the bread into my hand, and pushed me out the door. It broke my heart to leave her, and it broke hers to send me away. If I had known at that moment I would not see her again all that year, I probably wouldn't have left her. Had I stayed, both of us, and perhaps others in her barracks, could have paid with our lives. It was terrible to be alone without my parents, not knowing where Salig and Herschel were, or even if they were still alive. Especially at night, I tried to remember their faces. I told myself they were thinking of me as I was thinking of them. In our minds and hearts, we were together. But that thought wasn't enough to comfort or sustain me. All I could do was hold on and hope that my father would somehow find a way for me to be with him. Meanwhile, I did as I was told. Some days I hauled lumber or stones. Other times I pounded rocks into gravel or dug up cemetery markers that the Nazi then used to pave the roads. It was exhausting, hazardous work, and a single misstep could mean death. Can you imagine that, guys? So you being your age that you are, being left alone, all on your own, and just having to go through all of this all alone. I think that would be really, really hard. I can't even imagine as a kid. But kids are pretty resilient. They're pretty tough. They can go through a lot, I think, and make it out on the other side pretty well, which Leon does, by the way. So let's see what happens next, okay? One day, while carrying a large rock, I slipped on a broken headstone and badly gashed my leg. I had to go to the camp infirmary to have the cut bandaged. I learned later that the commandant of Plazo, SS Hauptsturmführer Amin Goethe, had entered the infirmary shortly after I had left and shot all the patients. Just shot every single one of them for no reason except for that he felt like it. Had I remained just a few minutes longer, I would have been executed with the others. When I had heard what happened, I promised myself no matter what, I would never go to the infirmary again. Can you believe that? That's crazy, right? So Leon Layson, needless to say, all the things he's been through already to survive. It's pretty amazing. His whole story is based on just his life story, which is he's made it through all of this to be where he ended up at the end of the story. So it's pretty amazing. All the things that he goes through and all the things that could have happened to him but didn't. Kind of sounds like Long Walk to Water. So kind of a similar, like we couldn't believe that he lived either and survived, and look what he had done for the world, for Africa. So back to Amin, I have to say Amin Goethe. That's a very powerful person in the SS. We already read that, so sorry about that. Avoiding the infirmary didn't mean escaping the net of cruelty Amin Goethe cast over the camp. When my work detail passed men in groups, I would hear the whispers being exchanged as they kept tally of the casualties by Goethe and his henchmen as if they were soccer scores. What's the total today, someone might ask. Jews 12, Nazis 0. It was always a 0 for the Nazi dead. As the winter of 1943 began, Goethe's wrath intensified. I had been ordered to shovel snow with a group of men. With no winter clothes, I was so frozen I could hardly hold the shovel. Suddenly, Hauptsturmfuhrer Goethe showed up and on a whim demanded that the guards lash each of us 25 times with their savage leather whips. Yeah, it's getting pretty intense right now. So some of you complain that you have to go outside and maybe shovel the snow. You've got your boots on, maybe some gloves and a coat, where Leon was out doing this without any kind of winter clothing on. And then Goethe, who is what I would say a monster, comes and demands that all of them get whipped 25 times. I can't even imagine that. None of us could figure out what provoked him, but that did not matter. As commandant, Goethe could do whatever he wanted, with or without reason. He seemed to thrive on inflicting agony on the helpless. He watched the spectacle for a while, then decided that the whippings were going too slow, so he had his guards set up long tables and lined us up in rows 4 across. With 3 men twice my age and stature, I went up to receive my punishment. We were ordered to count the lashes as we were whipped. If we were overcome by pain and missed a number, the guard started over at number 1. I leaned over the table and waited the first lash. When it came, it felt like someone was cutting me open with a knife. 1, I cried out as the whip cracked. My instinctive reaction was to cover my backside before the next stroke could hit, so the second crack of the whip fell across my hands. 2, I managed to get out. 3, 4. Although I was numb from the cold, the pain seared through me each time like being branded by a poker. 12, 13, 14. Would this torture ever end? I knew I had to hold on and not falter, or it would start all over again. I knew I couldn't survive another round. After 25 blows, I staggered away, delirious with pain. Somehow I managed to stumble back with the others to our work detail. My legs and buttocks throbbed. They were black and blue for months, and sitting was torture. Yeah, it's hard for me to read, and I'm sure that's hard for you to, some of you to listen to. And again, true story, this has happened. And again, one of the reasons I read this is because I never ever want this part of our history to ever repeat itself. And so the more that we tell these stories and then we share them with people, the more hopefully people understand that if something like this were to happen again, that maybe we could step up and be a part of it and help, not be a part of it, but be a part of helping to stop this, because it's not okay. And not many people stepped in to help for a long time. Driven by pain and desolation, that evening, I risked additional beatings or worse by sneaking over to my father's barracks. I simply had to see him and tell him what had happened. Before I could get the words out, I began to cry. Trying to hold it together, not yet 15 years old, I had finally cracked. I desperately needed his sympathy, but he offered none. He showed not a flicker of emotion when I arrived or when I finally blurted out my story. Instead, he remained silent, his face hardened and his jaw clenched. Perhaps what he felt was relief that no matter how bad it had been for me, I had survived Goeth's brutality. Sorry. Maybe his anger and sadness were so great that he feared breaking down if he tried to console me. Whatever he felt, he didn't share it. Forlorn, feeling totally abandoned, I returned to my barracks. As I lay on my shelf, I listened as the men reviewed the day's score. Jews, 20. Nazis, 0. Despondently, I picked a few lice off my sweater, but gave up trying to get them all. I just didn't care. The lice crawled through my hair and my clothes as I finally drifted off to sleep. The horrific days came to follow a routine. We were stunned awake before dawn by the sound of crashing doors and shouted orders. We assembled in groups according to our barracks number and were counted and recounted while short-tempered, cruel guards harassed us. Then we were assigned to groups for the day's labor. Sometimes we left camp to chop ice, shovel snow, or work on roads. We never got anything to eat until the workday end. Then a big pot was brought out as we raced to retrieve our indispensable spoons and bowls. That one meal never varied. Hot water with a little salt or pepper. Can you imagine? Like water with salt and pepper. That was his meal. He hasn't eaten all day. And then, if we were lucky, bits of potato skin and slivers of other vegetables. The men laid in the soup were prisoners too, and sometimes one of them would take pity on me, stir the bottom of the pot, and put a real piece of potato in my bowl. That made the day exceptional. After the meal, we lay on our shelves, trying to gather strength for the next day. I really don't know how they survived. Like, I don't know how you can survive doing all that hard manual labor and not eating. And when you do eat, it's just pretty much water, maybe a little bit of potato, and that was it. Through the barbed wire fences surrounding the camp, I could look out and sometimes see the children of the German officers strutting back and forth, wearing their Hitler Youth uniforms and singing songs praising the Führer, Adolf Hitler. They were so exuberant, so full of life, while just a few yards away from them, I was exhausted and depressed, struggling to survive another day. Only the thickness of the barbed wire separated my life in hell from their lives of freedom, but we might as well have been on separate planets. I couldn't begin to understand the injustice of it all. So if you've ever seen if you've read the book, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, I really like the book. The movie was okay, but I like the book a lot better. Like most of our books that we read this year, I always tend to think the books are better. As the months dragged on, I despaired. I didn't dare risk trying to see my father or mother again, not because I feared for myself, but because I feared the punishment that would come to them if I were discovered in their barracks. My first reaction to Plazo, that I would never leave alive, was reinforced every day. Another day, I thought, my luck would run out and I'd be killed, either by Goethe or one of his accomplices. I'd be a number in that day's score. Goethe was a stout man with an arrogant sneer and a bully's swagger. His chilling stare haunted me and filled not only my waking hours, but my nightmares. Even when he was nowhere in sight, I felt his eyes on me. I saw Lucas, would you say, how many of the 20 died from hunger? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure. They never really say how they died. I'm going to guess it was a mixture. Hunger. I can't imagine most people weren't dying from hunger. But again, you have Goethe there, and he's randomly just killing people too. So, and it could be so many different reasons. Disease, injuries that got infected, things like that. So I honestly, I don't know the number that died from hunger. During the day, from time to time, I would see my brother or father at a distance, heading from one job to another, and the brief sighting would give me a sliver of hope. All too soon, that hope would drain away. So author's giving you a clue. Okay, so he has hope. He's seen his brother and his father every once in a while. Although Schindler had not hired me, I did have a bit of good luck. The brush factory where I had worked in the ghetto had been relocated to Plazo, and I was assigned to the 12-hour night shift. I was relieved to have a steady job and an official place to go. Being idle or waiting for random work assignments only invited trouble. Working in the brush factory also meant I could be inside, where it was warmer, instead of outside chopping ice or shoveling snow. Yet the brush factory, too, had its horrors. One time while I was at work, a guard singled me out. I had been promoted from gluing on the bristles to fastening the wooden halves of a brush together with brads. It was meticulous and demanding work, but I had a knack for it. The guard watched me and then pointed a gun at my head. "If the next brad is crooked, I'll shoot you," he said. I didn't pause or look up. I just kept working and fastened the halves together with the brad. Cautiously, I moved the finished product toward him to inspect. It was straight. He walked away and I continued working as if nothing had happened. Somehow, I don't know how, I kept my emotions under control. A few nights later, Amin Goethe stomped into the factory with his 2 dogs, Ralph and Rolf, and a squad of his flunkies. Bored and probably drunk, he pulled his pistol out of its holster and shot our foreman. Simply shot him at point-blank range for absolutely no reason. As the foreman crumpled to the floor, blood pooled around his head, Goethe turned his attention to us. Waving the gun, he yelled an order at his men, who divided us into 2 groups. Somehow I knew this separation was not a good thing. Sure enough, I found myself on the wrong side once again, assigned to a group of children and older workers. In other words, assigned to the group deemed expendable. Goethe and his men marched back and forth, debating something I couldn't hear what. When their backs were turned, I held my breath and sneaked over to the other group, the one made of the stronger workers. If Goethe had seen me, he surely would have shot me or ended my life in an even worse way. Soon it didn't matter which group I was in. After a few minutes, Goethe lost interest. He holstered his gun, and as abruptly as he had entered the factory, he left, his 2 dogs trailing him out the door. We stood in our groups for another half an hour, too afraid to move. Finally, one of the guards told us to go back to our barracks. Once there, many of the men broke down, sobbing, realizing how close we had come to death. This time, I didn't cry. I had grown numb to what might have happened to me, to whatever my fate might be. In late 1943, Schindler bribed Goethe and other SS leaders for permission to build a subcamp on the property adjacent to Emalia. He argued that it would be far more efficient if workers were a few steps from the factory instead of wasting precious time marching the 2.5 miles between Emalia and the camp. So they walked 2.5 miles to get to their work. The hours lost in forming lines and walking back and forth between the factory and Plazo could be better spent producing goods and making a profit. The Schindlers Subcamp was built. In the spring of 1944, my father and David moved there. I learned through the camp network that Pasha had also been assigned to a similar subcamp on the property of the electrical factory where she worked. My mother and I were alone once again, as we had been in the ghetto, but this time it was much worse. Partly because I was separated from her, partly because this was such a terrible, dangerous place. I sank into deeper despair. When word passed through the camp that Schindler planned to add 30 Jews to his workforce, I didn't think anything about it. However, a few days later, I learned that a list had been created, and my name was on it, along with my mother's. I couldn't believe it. It seemed too good to be true. After a year of trying, had my father finally succeeded in getting us into Schindler's Factory? I counted off the days until we were to leave. Finally able to see a way out of the Plazo Inferno, I felt stronger in spirit, if not body. Luckily, my spirit willed my body to keep going. The day before our scheduled transfer came a crushing blow. My supervisor at the brush factory told me my name had been crossed off the transfer list. I was to stay at my current job at Plazo. No words can express the absolute terror I felt. Having been given a little ray of hope, the loss of it was worse than not having had it at all. I knew I wouldn't survive the next month in Plazo, let alone the next year. I was starving. I lived in constant fear. I found myself cowering at the slightest sound of movement. What could I do? How could I go on? The day the new Schindler Jews were ready to leave for the subcamp, I sneaked away from my job at the brush factory to see my mother off. It was a miracle that nobody had stopped me as I walked across the camp toward the gates where those who were going to the subcamp had assembled. I moved closer, telling myself if I had to act. I couldn't let this last opportunity disappear. I had no future in Plazo. I might as well die attempting to be with my mother. My last few steps put me in front of the German officer in charge of my transfer. My eyes were on a level with his enormous belt buckle adorned with a large Nazi swastika. I am sure this man was one of the ones who roamed the camp shooting people, either following Goethe's orders or just for his own entertainment. I gulped and made my case to him in German. I am on the list, I told him, but somebody crossed my name off. The man didn't respond. In an effort to strengthen my case, I said, my mother's on the list. What gave me the audacity to speak to him as if he were a person capable of reason, I'll never know. As if that wasn't enough, I added, my father and brother are already there. I couldn't have put my life at greater risk. I waited, agonizing second following agonizing second, as the officer seemed to ponder what to do with me. I was lucky he thought at all and didn't just pull out his gun and shoot me. Resolving in a second the dilemma presented him by this little Jewish boy. He motioned for his assistant to bring over the list. I pointed to my crossed-out name. That's my name right there, I told him. The officer peered down at me, grunted, and signaled for me to join the group of workers leaving for Schindler's Subcamp. For some mysterious reason, he responded as if he saw me as a regular human being who had made a reasonable request. Did he take pity on me, a boy separated from his family? Did he see one of his own children in me? Was he simply being a bureaucrat who didn't like the fact that a name had been crossed off without his official permission? There's no way of knowing. People like him could do whatever they wanted, show mercy or the opposite. My legs quaking, I quickly made my way into the group and found my mother. She had been standing near the front, staring straight ahead as commanded, completely unaware of what was causing the delay at the back of the group. She could hardly contain her joy as I quietly appeared beside her and slid my hand into hers. We somehow managed to stand silently, scarcely breathing, not wanting to draw attention to ourselves. We waited for what seemed like an eternity until the gate opened. Finally, our group started to move, and I dared to think my time in hell might at last be coming to an end. So that is the end of chapter 7. So some pretty hard things to hear in there. Some of the ways that the Jewish people were treated in those camps, the work that they had to do, is really, really sad. But the reason, again, I read this is Leon got through all of those terrible, horrible things because he had hope, and that he really hoped that he would be with his family again. He hoped that he would live. And I think that's the biggest factor in getting through any kind of bad time. As long as you have hope, you have some kind of light that you are working toward at the end of the tunnel, you will get through. So on that note, does anyone have any questions, any comments? It is Friday. I decided I am taking Saturday and Sunday off, so I'll begin reading on Monday again. With that note, I'm just looking to see if anybody would say anything. I'm trying to read. It's really bright out here. All right. Well, guys, I love you guys. I hope you have a great afternoon. It's beautiful out. Get outside. I don't know what I'm going to do today. Probably go for another bike ride and another walk. But I miss you guys terribly. Marin, I did see your hugs yesterday after I stopped the video, but I was getting your hug yesterday, just so you know, and I'm getting your hug again today. Hopefully you feel my hug, Marin. I miss you guys. I was not happy to hear of the news yesterday. You guys know how I get all emotional, but it was hard to hear and not coming back to school. So I'm going to keep hope that maybe, just maybe, you guys probably don't feel this way, but maybe, just maybe, we could go to school at the end if these things work out for us. But anyway, I just want to say I love you guys. I hope you have a great afternoon. I love reading to you. I love that you tune in, and I miss you guys terribly. Have a great day. I love you. Take care. And I can't even see how to, where's my arrow to end this? Okay. I love you guys. And I'm trying to end this. I guess I'll have to go into my house so I can see. There I am. Okay. There it is. All right. I love you guys. Have a great day.